Without further ado, I would like to welcome Gregory Katz to the microphone. Gregory is the founder and CEO of the Smart Surfaces Coalition. Without further ado, please turn it over to Greg.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Peter. It's great to join you on this important subject. Let me start with a shameless promotion, my book, Greening Our Built World, Costs, Benefits, and Strategies. And let me just observe there are only 137 shopping days till Christmas. The sponsors for this book include groups like the National Association of Realtors and BOMA International, which is the largest real estate group, as well as the American Public Health Association. Why did the American Public Health Association want to sponsor this work? Well, because they understand that the built environment has enormous impact on health and quality of life. If you look at cities around the world, they're an average 9 degrees Fahrenheit hotter because of what's called urban heat island. We've decided to pave over cities and make them dark and impervious. Low-income areas of cities are hotter than that. They're 15 degrees hotter, peak summer temperature in the summer. That structural inequality is a huge reason for disproportionately large adverse health effects, premature deaths in low-income areas around the world. That affects a couple billion people. The Smart Surfaces Coalition is really designed to redress this issue. I had the opportunity to work on, be part of a panel for DC with the mayor and the president of American University, the head of environment, small group people met over 3 years to try and figure out how Washington, DC, where I live, could become one of the greenest cities in the world. Cities have leadership that care about these issues, but then you say to them, how does the city manage sun and rain? And they say, well, we have great environmental and health aspirations, but we don't get into the issue of surfaces, go to the Department of Transportation. And when you do that and you say to the Department of Transportation, when you make surfacing decisions for roads or parking lots or any of these other surfaces, do you think about impact on heat? No. Do you consider impact on health or air pollution or water pollution? No. Do you consider impact on environmental justice or competitiveness or heat deaths or credit rating? No. So we have a very dysfunctional system universally in the world for making design decisions about city surfaces, and that determines temperature, air quality, livability, flooding, and risk. It's a really big overlooked issue. So this coalition is 40 plus organizations, mostly in the US, but also Europe and Asia. It's the leading health group, the American Public Health Association, the leading architecture group, the American Institute of Architects, the leading planning group in the US, the American Planning Association, and then groups like Habitat for Humanity and the International Downtown Association, the organizations that represent the downtowns of the 600 of the largest cities in the world. They're very concerned about reshaping their surfaces in a way to make the cities less vulnerable to climate change rather than more vulnerable, more equal rather than less equal. And I'm going to send around a link to the website, and you can look at videos on this. It's smartsurfacescoalition.org. What we've done is work with cities across the country, and we're looking at working with cities internationally as well to do a detailed cost-benefit mapping that answers the questions, what if you adopt surfaces that are smart, not stupid? And a stupid surface is dark and impervious, which means you absorb almost all the heat, which re-radiates. The water then in an impervious surface travels across the city, flooding, causing mold and health problems. A smart surface, by contrast, is a highly reflective surface. It might bounce 80% of the incoming heat back into space. It's a surface that's porous. It captures water and does groundwater recharge. It's a green surface, like a bioswale or green roof. It's like solar PV, which I put on my home here. When I put it on, one of the things that happened is my air conditioning bill dropped. Why did that happen? It's because the solar roof on my home kept the heat and sunlight off of the building. And then the last component is trees. So trees are very important for water management, shade, and air quality. So what happens when a city adopts smart surfaces? So we're just finishing up a big study for and with Baltimore, a city of 650,000 people. If you adopt smart surfaces across the city over 20 years, you have a net present value of about $10 billion, which is a lot for a city of that size. The benefit cost ratio is about 7-to-1. These are in areas like lower energy bills, lower water bills, lower health bills, increased employment, avoided loss of tourism, a whole series of benefits that we intuitively know to be true, but haven't been quantified before. We're doing similar work in Stockton and in California. You also see that the benefits are greatest for low income and minority areas. So one neighborhood in Baltimore, 5% tree coverage, minority low income neighborhood. The wealthy, mostly white neighborhoods have 40% tree coverage. That is called structural inequality, and it characterizes cities around the world. We recently received Macarthur Foundation funding for 2 years of operations. Two of our steering committee members ran multilateral development banks, the International Finance Corporation and the Inter-American Development Bank. And we're starting to work with these multilateral institutions to reshape how they define their surfaces. Normally what they do is they say, we're going to build a hospital and we're going to go for lowest first cost. We're not going to be concerned about the reflectivity or porousness of those surfaces. And now the hospital gets built, has a dark roof, huge amount of heat gets absorbed. The air conditioning bill goes up. You have to build more air conditioning to manage it, which causes a surge in electricity consumption. The areas around that hospital are dark, impervious surfaces. That means that the ambient temperature goes up, air pollution like smog goes up, water runoff increases, so you've got more risk of mold. If you look around the world, between 1 and 2 billion people live in jurisdictions today that by 2040 or so will be unlivable. The summer temperature will be so high that their body will not be able to release sufficient heat at nighttime. The ambient temperature in the day is going up, and it's going up even faster at nighttime. So you're seeing all of the excess heat deaths in low-income minority areas. That phenomenon of heat deaths over multiple hot days in the summer is becoming a much more visible global phenomenon. A decade ago in Europe, there were 50,000 excess heat deaths, for example, in one 3 or 4 day heat event. If you look at a place like India, which is struggling with COVID, the respiratory systems of people are much more vulnerable when they're under heat stress. They're already stressed out. They have problems managing their own heat management, which means their body's in stress. They're breathing really hard. They're more vulnerable to epidemics like COVID. So there's a direct link between the surfaces in our city and our vulnerability to pandemics. So if you listen to someone like Georges Benjamin, who's the head of the American Public Health Association, which is the leading US association on health, he tells a very powerful, he's an MD, by the way, he tells a very powerful story about how our surface decisions in cities, which are designed for dark impervious surfaces, result in systematic, very large health risks in the US and globally. It's a very powerful story. If you take smart surfaces and you apply them nationally in the US, over 20 years, the net present value is around $1 trillion. So substantial impact. You can reduce greenhouse gases by about 10% equivalent, mostly from increasing reflectivity of surfaces. So a good way to think about this is the Arctic. Climatologists are freaked out by what's going on, which is you've got less and less ice cover. What does that mean? It means incoming sunlight is not bounced back into space off of ice, rather it's absorbed in the water. And when it's absorbed in the water, it heats up the ice, which then increases the water coverage, reduces ice coverage. So the smart surfaces strategy's objective is to increase the reflectivity, or the technical term is albedo, of city surfaces. And doing that can have these very large financial and health benefits. The much sneered at mayor of New York, Bill de Blasio, a year and a half ago, because of heat waves, bought 37,000 inexpensive air conditioners. What happens when you install an air conditioner in a city? Well, you're rejecting 3 or 4 times as much heat. So city temperatures can go up by 2 degrees because of additional air conditioners. And of course, they're very inefficient air conditioners because they're priced low. They use HCFCs as a coolant. Those are released. Those are a very high potency greenhouse gas. You get greenhouse gas increasing warming in the city from the air conditioners. The outdoors now becomes louder, less pleasant, hotter, and uglier, which means that time outdoors goes down. And of course, air conditioners work for a few hours in the summer afternoons or more, which means that you've got a peak additional demand for electricity. Because it's not base load, you're going to have inefficient power generation, which contributes further to global warming. So this vision of an individual solution to heating cities through more air conditioners is really a road to hell. The alternative is citywide adoption of smart surfaces. Americans say, look, we can reduce a city temperature by 2 or 3 degrees in the next 10 years. We can reduce it by 4 or 5 degrees in low income areas. So in Baltimore, for example, citywide temperature reduction from adoption of smart surfaces 2.7 degrees. In low income areas with less trees and darker surfaces, it's a 4 degree temperature reduction. So this strategy is a way to rethink city surfaces, how we manage sun, how we manage rain. We all know intuitively that we're happier outdoors in spaces that are cooler, less polluted, and greener. But we're not able to quantify the health benefits. We can now do that with an online cost benefit analytic engine at a city, regional, or neighborhood level, which will allow us for the first time to make informed decisions about our city surfaces. So this ties into health, it ties into climate, ties into environmental justice, and it's very job creative. This strategy just in Baltimore creates 1,000 permanent jobs. So the Smart Surfaces Coalition.org is a organization that's growing very rapidly in the US and internationally. And if you're interested, please go on our website and learn more. It's one of the largest climate mitigation strategies, perhaps the largest adaptation strategy we have, and is one of the things that we absolutely have to do if we're going to stay under 1.5 C increase, which is what all the scientists tell us. And I assume everybody on the call believes in science. So it's a very powerful tool, and it's one that turns out to be quite cost effective when you do the math right.
Greg, thanks. This is really, really cool stuff. This is some of the stuff that I love sitting around talking all day about. A couple questions rolling in. Question number one, is there anything in the infrastructure bill that's addressing this or going to be helpful in any way, or are we still not there understanding this politically?
It's a great question. We don't understand it politically. We are in discussion with people in the administration in the House and the Senate about including this. An infrastructure bill should include language that specifically says all infrastructure associated with this expanded airport, expanded road, expanded schools, all of those surfaces should be smart surfaces. We're trying to get that language in. We think we're likely to. It hasn't been finalized yet. But when you design something right the first time, very low marginal cost or zero cost, we have to go back and retrofit it. It's very expensive. And just to give one example, the San Francisco airport is adopting this strategy to keep the temperature of the runways down and to keep down their energy bills and to make the environment around the airport safer and cleaner and lower temperature in the summer. So we hope it'll be in the bill. We're working on it. Anybody on this call who's got ideas for how to help us do that, we'd love to hear from you.
What about easy places to start? I mean, let's say you're a city or you're working with a city. I mean, is it going out and painting the rooftops white? Is it trees? I mean, what's the cheap and easy step one to, just starting to address the whole concept of this is about surfaces. Let's start there.
Yeah, it's a great question, Nick. some of the obvious things to do is to stop doing stupid things. So to the extent that the city is putting in a new parking lot, instead of making it super dark and impervious, make it reflective and porous. If you've got city buildings, they're typically flat surfaces, very dark. The cost of going in and resurfacing that is pretty low. It's 50 to 75 cents a square foot, roughly. What's interesting is because you go from a dark surface, and this is true of parking lots and roads as well, when you go from a dark surface to a lighter color surface, you have much less expansion and contraction every day. The diurnal expansion and contraction, when you go from 70 degrees at night to 150 degrees in the summer, which is the surface temperature of these dark surfaces, means expansion, contraction, which means you get cracking. So the additional cost of retrofitting or resurfacing roads, parking lots, and large roofs with a more reflective surface, that extends the life of those surfaces, and it more than pays for the cost premium up front. So the challenge is cities say, we're going to do what's ever lowest cost, first cost. And what you want them to say is what's the actual lowest cost when you take into account replacement time and then these other issues as well. So, stop doing stupid stuff, resurface existing areas, for sure, planting trees. We want to do more solar. We have a project with NREL, the National Renewable Energy Lab, that will document for the first time the benefits of solar in urban areas. I mentioned solar on my roof here. One of the benefits is that roof is protected from heat, which means it lasts longer and I don't have as big an air conditioning bill. So it's just a great way to bring down city temperature and temperature in buildings. And that is a huge economic burden on low-income residents that we can largely mitigate.
I want to ask about financing all of this stuff. Example, my company South Pole works with an organization called City Forest Credits, who plant trees in urban areas. And they're, of course, and it's typically funded by corporations and philanthropy. And there's, of course, a million benefits to this, but one thing that we're able to add to the mix is carbon credits against that planting, which, of course, provides another incentive for companies to want to participate in this. What other kinds of clever financial mechanisms are out there to help drive the adoption of smarter surfaces?
Well, we'd like to talk with you, Nick. If you think you can help us get carbon credits, let's talk after this. It's a great idea. It's something we have not focused on yet. I do think, Simone gave, I think, a very powerful presentation about low income and what Freddie Mac is doing about it. The focus really should be in low income areas. So in Baltimore, the modeling we're doing for adoption is citywide adoption, but then accelerated adoption in low income areas, which means that tree coverage of 5% grows more rapidly in low income areas than in wealthy areas. And what's interesting is when you do the math for the city as a whole, over-investing in lower income areas benefits the city financially. Why? Because temperature doesn't respect neighborhood boundaries, air pollution doesn't respect neighborhood boundaries, water and flooding doesn't respect it. And so there's not only a moral reason for addressing urban environmental injustice, there's a self-interested financial reason if you can do the math right.
Quick question from Antoine. This will probably wrap us up. Oh, and by the way, hold up your book again. No shame in sharing that. There are a couple of people asking to make sure they can write that down.
This book is so exciting. You won't be able to sleep at night. So I've forewarned you. It's absolutely gripping, pacey, filled with sex and violence. Everybody will love it. Only 130 shopping days and 23 hours till Christmas. So you better rush and buy this.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Excellent. Last question real quick from Antoine. He wants to know about the premium to using smart surfaces on new construction. In theory, there shouldn't be a premium. This should be a no-brainer, but presumably there may be. What's the deal there?
Trees cost about $250 to plant, and they provide a lot of benefits, shade and water management and air quality. If a new design going to a higher albedo surface either costs no more or a little bit more. So to make it cost justified, you have to step back and say, wait a minute, it's going to extend the life of this surface. Is that a good thing? Yes. Does that more than offset the cost premium? And the answer is yes. And then on top of that, if you step back and say, wait a minute, because we use dark surfaces today, our cities are on average 9 degrees hotter in the summer, the urban heat island. In low income areas, maybe 15 degrees hotter. Is that a problem? Of course it's a problem. It's huge adverse health consequences, huge increase in energy bills. So once you begin to factor those in, it becomes compelling. Again, the benefit cost ratio at a city level in Baltimore is about $7 billion. If you think about tourism, which is something we quantify, but is not included in the analysis I've cited, tourism is increasingly at risk from hotter and hotter summers. So imagine a city in Southern Europe, or a city like Orlando in the US, or a city like Lima in South America, or Sao Paulo. They can now adopt a strategy to cool that city by peak temperature by 3 or 4 degrees, 5 degrees. That's a great strategy to protect them against excess heat. And then one last comment is city credit rating determines whether cities can borrow money and at what cost. There's a 3-part series in risk and insurance documenting how adopting smart services protects city credit rating and enhance it. So if you go on the website, smartsurfacescoalition.org, all of these materials are available for free and to download.
Fantastic. Greg, thanks a million. This has been a terrific conversation.